they are trying to orient themselves in their life as they're picking their major. And that is true for all of our students. And so valuing them in terms of asking about purpose and meaning and how they make their way in the world, those conversations are really powerful. And I would say if I were going to teach faculty or staff, like, here's how you can have this rich relationship with a student, those are the kinds of conversations I would want them to be having with students. Help me understand you and what you like and how you're going to impact the world for good and what makes you happy. What are your passions? Those are some really good talking points where students don't feel overwhelmed by those conversations, but they're super hungry to have those discussions. Thank you for joining me. Another episode of Cap and Gown. I'm Rachel Phillips, VP for Student Success. Hey, Michelle. Hope you are having a great semester. I was just dreaming about weather changes in some of our schools. So in Texas, it is still very, very hot, still in the 90s, but I was thinking about the cool weather that is coming to so many of your campuses, which is always refreshing. I'm excited about today because we're going to talk about 5 factors of a campus that is thriving in terms of relationship building, which so many of you guys are really disciplined to do. I know that that's such a big part of your work, but I also really love the idea of being able to identify specific values that you want to make sure you're investing in so that your campus can thrive in that relationship constellation that we were talking about before. So I'm by myself today. I mean, besides all of you joining me. So we're probably going to have a pretty short time together because I don't have anyone to talk back to me. But I do want to start off with our State of the Union. You guys know rankings came out recently. So I was just saying before we started that I've seen so many on LinkedIn of you guys posting your new rankings and kind of where you're being specialized and the awards that you're getting. And so congratulations for that. That's always a really fun part of rankings. One thing in terms of State of the Union is that the new rankings have not penalized any school for a lack of ACT or SAT data. So usually when these rankings come out, that ACT score or SAT score makes up about 5% of the college ranking. And it used to be that in the past, if you didn't submit enough ACT scores, so if you were like below 50%, you got penalized for that. But this year that did not happen. And actually less than 50% of schools gave ACT, SAT because they've gone to test optional. So I think that's pretty interesting. You remember previously that in 2019, they dropped the acceptance rate from the calculations. And then the last time they did that was 2004, where they stopped considering the number of accepted students who enrolled. So they took that out in 2004. Really, those rankings a lot of times are about graduation rates, indebtedness. That's about 40% of those rankings. So lots of excitement. If you have a new ranking that you're proud of, feel free to chat that. We would love to hear about it. But it's pretty exciting to see all of those changes. Also, you guys, there's a great article in Higher Ed Dive today about accreditation and how we need some shoring up of our accreditation, not so much for not-for-profit colleges, but for profit colleges and universities. Their kind of quarrel with accreditation is, first of all, at some institutions who are accredited, less than a quarter of students earn a 4-year degree within 6 years. So it's like, yes, we're accredited, but we're not seeing outcomes of student success, right? There are other accredited colleges who spend more than 50% of their budget, which, remember, oftentimes is coming from federal money, spending 50% of that budget on marketing and recruitment instead of teaching and learning. And again, they can say they're accredited, but it's not measuring the right things. It's not looking at that student success measure. So there's a lot of ideas about how to shore up the accreditation The one that I think is most important is they are talking about changing it so that the key student outcome metrics are tied to accreditation. So you can't accredit an institution if they don't have good graduation and retention rates. That you would have to say, like, you have to make changes. If you are letting a student in, you need to make sure that they have a path forward to success and graduation. Also, lengthening the amount of time that a public member can spend on the accreditation board so that they can use their expertise a little bit more. Things like protecting the commissioners against personal liability. And the idea with all of that is that those people then are in a position where they're able to protect the students without being worried about what's going to happen to them. So I think there are a lot of changes that are going to come about when we're thinking about accreditation, especially as now so many schools are focusing more on these student success outcomes, which I love. I think that's a great idea. I think the way that you improve retention and student success is you focus on the students in front of you and making sure that they're doing a good job. And so it makes sense that that would be tied then to accreditation. Okay, another article inside higher ed. This article is a little bit strange to me. It's called The Post-Pandemic College Campus as a Design Challenge, which sounds really interesting, but it's a long conversation with this woman who's talking about how to use sort of virtual reality spaces as you're thinking about your college campus. So I encourage you to read it. It's interesting in terms of where are we going to have classes, which oftentimes is one of our sparsest resources, right? We don't have that many classrooms, so we have to plan our class schedules around it and make sure, you know, that we have all of our classes spaced out. So there's some logistics there. But here's what I thought was most interesting about this. She's talking about how in the future, things like classroom spaces are going to move virtually, whether that's virtual reality or thinking about like a huge lecture hall where you have 500 students. Why wouldn't you just keep that online? Everybody can log on. There's not a lot of great resource in teaching to have a faculty member standing at the front of the class lecturing. However, she does say any next generation campus planning should think of the residential space for students as the heart of the campus and not the periphery, which I really think speaks to our experience of COVID, right? Which is we can send online learning out and we can do that well. We've learned a lot of things about how to do that better and how to structure classes and how to connect with each other, how to do that over video. However, that campus community and where students live is the heart of kind of their desire to be on a campus. And so thinking about how you rearrange your spaces and plan your spaces to really support this residential piece as opposed to just thinking about it for classrooms. So I think that that's pretty interesting. Okay, two more for you. I don't know if you guys saw this. I'm a little distressed by it, but I'm gonna try to bring it home for us. Okay, so Inside Higher Ed also just did another survey of students, asking them about remote work for student affairs professionals. So this is the latest student voice survey. They did it in the middle of July. About 2,500 undergraduates ask about their experiences with non-academic campus offices, including the students' comfort level with fully remote departments. Okay, students are like, offices don't need people, it's fine. Just everybody stay home and we're just gonna call you or have a remote meeting with you. So the two offices that they were most likely to say would need some staff are financial aid office and the counseling center. But only 56% of students said those two offices would need some staff. All of the other offices, they're like, yeah, I don't know why you have people working in those offices. So 1 in 4 students says that the bursar or the students account office needs a person in it. So everyone's like, no, we don't need anyone there. 1 in 3 said you must have somebody live in the registrar's office in the career center. Everyone else is like, yeah, we don't really care so much about that. So you guys, residence life, only 4 in 10 students said that residence life needs in-person employees. I think here's my 2 caveats to this survey, you guys. First of all, if your students do not value the people in those positions, right? If they're like, we could do without them, we can call them on the phone, that's fine. Then we're doing those positions wrong, right? Because you should be adding a lot of value to your students by being in a place where they can come and spend time with you, where you can see them, like all of the stuff that we talk about, relentless welcome, making sure that you're in the same space and time with them, collisions, right? All of that kind of stuff, you should be doing that in such a way that your students would say, oh my goodness, no, of course we want to be able to spend time with you and be on campus. So that's the first thing. The second thing is sometimes students don't know what they need. And the second half of this article really is about how students are thinking that it is easier to get access to people if they don't actually have to be in their office. So they want to just chat with you. They want a video call with you, select your calendar. Like they want you to be accessible often. And so this is talking about expanding office hours. 9 to 5 doesn't work for students. That's not what they're doing anymore. And you have some flexibility with that if you're not going to be on campus, right? You could set up different hours to work from home, but for sure, we need to be considering why students would say, we don't need to have people on campus. They can just work from home and we can do that kind of remote connection. So I don't think it's true for most of our campuses. I would assume that that would be more representative of really huge campuses where maybe they don't have that relational piece. But I did feel a little bit sad about students being like, no, we don't need people. It's fine. We're just going to go about our business. And they don't really add a lot of value here. So, okay, one more thing that I have for you guys. You know, my great friend, Sherry Woosley, who is super smart, I have her on the program all the time. She always adds such helpful insight and context to everything we do. She has a new survey that is, she's doing it with SACSA, which I think is SACSA, I think is how you say it. SACSA and Macmillan have a new survey about experiences of student affairs employees. So they're trying to figure out what drives student affairs happiness, engagement, satisfaction. They are collecting this so that it's actionable data, and then they're going to publish their findings and help you understand, like, these are the different things that are going on, and here's the trends that we see. It's totally anonymous, so it's not going to be tied to your institution, so they're not going to trace it back to you. However, if you guys will take that, Rachel has chatted the link to you if you are listening to us. The link is a bit.ly, so it's bit.ly, and then /student affairs survey. So you can go to that link and take that survey. I have a lot to say about what's happening in student affairs and burnout and job changeover and all of that kind of stuff that's going on. Not today, but we will be bringing Sherry on to help us understand some of those pieces. But you guys, I value so much your experiences and your insight. And so if you will go and help us get some data about what's going on in that profession, it will be really helpful in the long run. And I'm sure that we will get some great insights out of that. So please join us there for that and talk to us about it. Okay, that is the State of the Union. So we are going to talk today about how you sort of consider your culture when it comes to relationship-rich atmosphere. And so remember, when we're talking about culture, we're not talking about one or two things that are kind of off kilter. We're saying, like, this is the stuff that we swim around in, right? This is the way that we exist on this campus. And every campus is going to be a little bit different. But we've been working out of this relationship-rich education by Felton and Lambert. They have a chapter in this book that is about values that they see consistently on relationship-rich campuses. And so I suspect for you guys that as I'm going through these, some of them you're going to be like, yes, we do a great job of that. But some of them are going to be places where you say, we want to focus a little bit. We need to stop and look and see how we're investing in this particular value. And remember, I'm not talking about individual investment. I'm talking about systemic campus culture investment. And so by that, I mean, if Rebecca is doing a great job on her campus and everything she touches, she is enriching with these values, she's going to be in the middle of a relationship rich experience, right? Her students are going to get that. She's going to get that, but that is not cultural, because if the culture at large, if her colleagues and her faculty and her administration aren't dedicated to that culture, then it's just Rebecca who's doing a good job, and the school campus culture doesn't get credit for that. So you can for sure be assessing what you're doing individually, but I also want you to be thinking about, how am I supported in these things that are important as we're trying to build a relationship rich culture? Okay. So 2 hardships when you're trying to build this culture. First of all, like we've already talked about with classrooms, a classroom oftentimes is the centerpiece of collisions and of thoughtfulness and of people coming together. And yet, so often those classrooms are not built around relational practices and relationships. So if you think about kind of the old school, the way that classrooms were, right, where we have a faculty member standing in the front and they're lecturing and everyone's taking notes and you're not supposed to talk to each other and all of those sorts of things. This is a mainstay of our college campuses, and yet it was not built to be a relationship rich environment. And so there are things that you can do about that, but I wanted to read to you. In 2018, an observational study of the STEM classes taught by 548 individual faculty at 25 North American universities documented the teaching practices and undergraduate experiences in 709 different courses, ranging from large introductory sections to small upper level classes. Only 18% of the observed classes employed student-centered teaching, such as active learning activities integrated. By contrast, 55% of the observation revealed teaching that was limited or had no observed student involvement except sporadic questions to and from the student, right? So this is a really hard thing when we're thinking about building relationship-rich environments. We have to address the classroom and figure out how to better have students at the center of that learning. And I think there's some excitement about this as everyone's come back to campus and they get to be in the same space. I think there's opportunity to kind of build that into those classes, but that can be a challenge as we're thinking about our culture. And then the other challenge that we've talked about often in our time together is just that reward systems oftentimes on a campus don't reward or value relationships. So if you think about, for your faculty and your staff, student development and academic, how are we rewarding successful mentoring on our campus? How are we giving reward and value to great advising? How do we even know whether or not that is happening on our campus? What about great teaching? How are we valuing that and rewarding it? And then I always add this piece in, how do you value the people on your campus who are in tune enough with their students to be able to identify a student who is struggling very quickly and get them to the right place? That can be a really difficult part of building this relationship rich culture, is that if you are focused on research or just teaching or just advising, right? Because this is another piece of it. It's like, yes, I do advising and I get an extra stipend because I do that. But is it good advising? Is it relationship rich advising? That's a totally different thing than oftentimes people need coaching to even understand what that means. So a really big challenge is looking at how are we rewarding our staff and our faculty for investing in this relationship rich culture. It's really funny because I was talking to a school the other day and they were saying they're working an impact cohort, which you guys know is where we tell you, here's your 200 students that we think are most at risk. And we actually have a whole program where we say, here's the email you're going to send to them the first month. Here are the things we want you to do with them. Here's what you're sending to your faculty who have agreed to be mentors. I was talking to the provost from one of the schools, and she was like, faculty are really excited to do this thing, but they don't know how. They literally are like, what do I do now? So I'm a mentor. What does that mean? Am I allowed to take them to coffee? Am I allowed to ask them how they're doing? Am I allowed to show interest in them besides just this academic side? Like, help me understand where you come from and blah, blah, blah. And so it was a really helpful conversation to say, first of all, if the response from your staff and faculty who want to be mentors, they want to, if their response is, first of all, is this something that I should be doing, can be doing, how do I do it? It means your culture is not supporting it, right? Because they're like, oh, this is a new thing. Is this a thing how do I do this thing? That context of how do we teach people how to be good mentors? How do we create a culture where we expect, if you are on this campus, that you are investing in students in a relational way to make sure that they're being kind of seen as whole people and not just talking about the academic side of their life? That is a sign of a culture that needs to have those conversations. Because when a faculty member is like, am I allowed to have coffee with the student at the coffee shop on campus? If that is the question, then we have not done a good job of helping them feel equipped and understanding that that is a really big part of why our students come to our campus, because they want to be able to experience that. Okay, so I do want to talk about this idea of a relationship-rich culture. We've talked about it before in terms of relationship constellation, that we don't just want one person to be the point person or the touch point relationship for a student, but we want multiple people to fill that role because we all have different things that we're good at. And so I think it's really interesting to think about the transactional pieces of a student's journey on your campus. So we have a major and we have a plan of study and we have credit hours and you have to pay your bill and you have to, apply for graduation, like all of those transactions. And that is super well mapped out. In fact, it's so well mapped out that when a student is a freshman, in so many of our seminar classes, one of the things that they do is they say, over the next 4 years, these are the transactional elements that I have to achieve in order then to graduate and have a diploma from this place. But we have not been as good at mapping out the relational elements that we expect our students to walk through. So thinking about what are things that they have to do when they're on our campus in order to be connected to our faculty, our student development staff, our Res Life staff, anybody on campus who can serve as a mentor and one point in that relationship constellation. I think there are ways that we can build out that map in a similar way that we've done with the transactional elements, so that students have a clear picture of those relationship things that they should be doing over their tenure. And I know there's a really big movement with that in terms of co-curricular, but tying those experiences then to how we allow them to make relationships with multiple people on campus, I think is a really core piece of that. So let's jump into the 5 values that you want to have on your campus in order to create this relationship-rich experience. The first one is that you want to make sure that you are valuing your students. And I feel like for this audience that goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's such an important element. The first piece of valuing your students, you guys, is appreciating the context that they are whole people and that they come from a place. And so being able to say, help me understand where you come from, what your experience is so valuable in communicating to them, you are a whole person and I want to understand you. And also the experiences you have and your perspective are incredibly important to our community. You come from a place, no matter where it is, that only you come from and your perspective is only yours. And we want you to come and show up in our community and help us understand the context of you and how you think about things and how you've experienced things and what's important to you and the choices you've made and those values. And so treating those students as whole people, it's why I always quarrel with breaking apart academic issues and all the other issues, because those things are connected. And if you can understand the context of a person, the whole person, where they come from, where they are, what's happening with them, what they're afraid of, then those academic issues all of a sudden are seen in a really different light. And we talk about that in terms of strengths-based, right? It's not that they're doing a bad job. It's not that they're failing. It's that they come with all of these resources that we can tap into that then we can support them on through success. So that's a really important piece. Also, I would say you guys valuing the student is recognizing that college is a lab for them where they're practicing so many of the things that they go on after 4 years and continue to employ in their life. So they're learning in all sorts of different ways. And one of the ways we value them is we say, we know that you are developing. We want to model good community for you. And we want everyone on this campus to be modeling good community for you so that you can build in these practices and experiences that are going to keep you for the rest of your time into adulthood. So I think that's super important. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of this value of students is you have heard me talk before about my background's as a counselor, and then I started doing career counseling, and I was afraid I was going to hate it because it seems like very detailed. Like, do you want to be a teacher or do you want to be a this? I don't really care what you want to do. Like, it doesn't matter to me. So I think I'm going to do a terrible job of this. And what I realized really quickly was that we were these students who were trying to pick their major. It wasn't a struggle necessarily of picking their major. It was a struggle of the meaning of their life, right? Like, how am I going to impact this world for good? Who am I? What am I good at? How am I going to make a decision that makes sense for me in all of the different ways? They are trying to orient themselves in their life as they're picking their major. And that is true for all of our students. And so valuing them in terms of asking about purpose and meaning and how they make their way in the world, those conversations are really powerful. And I would say if I were going to teach faculty or staff, like, here's how you can have this rich relationship with a student, those are the kinds of conversations I would want them to be having with students. Help me understand you and what you like and how you're going to impact the world for good and what makes you happy. What are your passions? Those are some really good talking points where students don't feel overwhelmed by those conversations, but they're super hungry to have those discussions. And so one of the ways you can value your students is by helping them make sense of the meaning of life in those conversations. Okay, so first value, we want to value our students. The next thing, one more thing I have to say about that, and it's super important, and that is you want to make sure that you are valuing your current students, not the students you wish you had. So I've had a lot of conversations on campuses where it's like, we would like different students. We want to have these kinds of students, or wouldn't it be nice if we could have these students? But part of the way that you value your students is you look at the ones in front of you and you think about that in terms of resources. What are their resources and what's their context and what do they bring? And those are the students that you've been given to be able to pour into, not some imaginary student that doesn't have all the stuff that's happening for the students in front of you. Okay, second value. The second value is the culture should value the efforts of faculty and staff to build those relationships. So hire, retain, promote, and reward those who view one of their principal responsibilities as construction and maintaining a relationship-rich environment. I love that so much because if I say to a faculty member, will you mentor students? And they say, am I allowed to do that? Then we have missed a step of hiring, promoting, teaching, retaining people who are invested in this relationship-rich idea, right? So remember, we know you value something not by your lip service to it, but your actual investment in it, your investment of time, your investment of money, resources. How do we value our faculty and staff who are committed to creating relationship-rich environments? And everybody on your campus, I mean, from the grounds crew all the way up to your president, should be rewarded for that investment. I was thinking about when I did the interview with Rachel Elam, and she was talking about working at the bookstore and how even in that space where you're here to buy books or you're here to, get your graduation stuff or whatever, the reward should be this building a relationship rich environment. When I'm talking to a mom and I'm saying congratulations, or when the parents are dropping the kid off and they're saying, you know, we're really nervous, you're going to do a great job, he's going to love it here, whatever that conversation is, everybody can be building those pieces in. And the way you get your staff and faculty to invest in that is you reward that kind of behavior and make sure that they know it's a key piece of what we expect here. I was thinking the other day about Amarillo College, who has an amazing president. They've done a movie on him. There's an article in the Atlantic about how he is changing that campus in terms of he has a lot of students that are low income or first generation. And so just investing resources in those students and trying to create a clear bridge for them to be successful. And he actually has in his faculty, what do you call it? Like their contract letter, that faculty will learn their students' names. It's one of the things, like, here's your responsibilities and duties. You should know your students' names. And I think he gives some timeline for that. But by putting that in the offer letter, we say we take that seriously. It's part of what you're counted on, and it's part of your responsibility as we're trying to create this relationship-rich environment. So I love that. I think it's really smart. And I also would say, again, for those who maybe don't know how to do that well, how are you investing in teaching them? So are you doing lunch and learns for them? Are you doing mentorship classes? Are you checking in on them? Are you saying, here's a way, an easy way for you to have a conversation with the student? Here's coffee cards, go take them a coffee. How are you teaching your faculty and staff to be able to do that really, really powerfully? Okay, so value your students, value those people on your campus who are invested in this relationship-rich environment. Next, you have to value high-quality teaching. I'm not going to say very much about that here because I think that that is pretty straightforward, but I will say that that emphasis on faculty and student interaction and helping them to do that really, really well is so important. We have this student development side that I think does that really naturally, but we have some skills over on that side that we can lend then to our academic side of the house to help them think through that piece. I want to read this about effective teaching. The primary determinant of a quality education is the teaching and learning relationship between faculty and students. Effective student-faculty interaction is correlated with increased retention and completion rates, better grades and standardized test scores, higher career and graduate school aspirations. Quite simply, students learn more and fail less when faculty members consult and utilize a large and growing body of research about effective training methods and making connections with students. Yet, despite the stakes now associated with undergraduate education, most institutions pay little attention to these findings. So if you just think through, how do we measure good teaching? How do we help our faculty have the capacity and the bandwidth to invest in our students in relational ways instead of just, you know, look to your left, look to your right. Some of you are going to be gone later, right? Also, you guys, every faculty and staff member has to really believe in this idea of we are creating a relentless welcome for our students. So we have to have conversations about that, and they have to understand their higher work, whatever their job is on a campus. We talk about this at Ferris all the time. Like, we all have jobs that we do at Ferris. We're all doing stuff, but we're always coming back to how are we changing the world for good? And the way we're doing that is we are supporting people who are supporting hundreds of students, and those students are going to go on to be more successful because of the work we're doing. We always tie it back to that. And so when we feel tired, we're like, yes, but remember, it's really good work. It's making an impact on people and it's changing their lives. And so keep doing what you're doing and keep being invested in that piece. And you have to be able to pull that back for anybody on your campus, no matter what their job, to say what you were doing is really, really important. I was reading about a campus that does unsung heroes, which I love. You know, I'm always thinking about action items. How do we lift up people who are doing a great job for student success and retention? And so unsung heroes is just about all of those people on your campus, whether it's the grounds crew or somebody that works in the cafeteria or somebody who's doing cleanup, people who are living out the mission of relationship-rich environments and talking to your students. They see them, they know them, they're invested in them. I just love so much finding who those people are and asking students. A student may feel very, very intimidated about going to a faculty member and making a friend or saying, hey, can we have coffee or whatever. It's a much easier access for them to say to the bookstore person, hey, you know, tell me about how you got here or whatever, to have that kind of relationship. So finding those unsung heroes and then saying, hey, we value what you are doing here, I think is super important in that piece. Okay, and then your last one is value this idea of engagement over prestige, which I think comes at a funny time when we're talking about rankings, right? But it's not about how elite we can be. It is about how engaged we can be. Now, to be clear, you could go to a school that's like, no, we don't care about that. We actually really do want to be elite. That is the most important thing. That's okay, but it's not conducive to relationship-rich environments, because then there's a lot of competition and we're not invested and we don't care about the context, and it really is like research, academic based, all of those sorts of things. So that's okay. That can be a choice that you make. But if you want to have a relationship-rich environment where students have the opportunity to connect with and create this mentor constellation, then you have to be more focused on your engagement measurements and outcomes than you are on whatever the ranking stuff is. So those are things like, our great faculty teach our freshmen, because they're going to be engaged, they're going to be connected, they're excited, they're exciting. We're not giving our freshman students adjunct faculty. We're going to give them faculty that are invested in the values and of this culture, right? Also, how you measure interventions. If you want to be engaged instead of elite, you have to be looking at what are you doing for your students and how is it working? What are the opportunities that students have to talk to people? How are we identifying students who are struggling? How are we getting them connected in relationships? And how does that impact their student success and their retention? If you are not measuring that with the same vigor that you are measuring all of the ranking stuff, then you have placed a value on one over the other, right? Because your resources are going here instead of going here. And so that idea of how do we measure what we do for our students and what the outcome on their success is really vital to that piece of being engaged instead of prestigious. And then you guys, the piece I think that is woven throughout all of this is teaching teachers and teaching mentors how to do what they do really, really well. I think it's so hard for many of us because it comes very naturally. But if you are going to say, hey guys, it's not so much about your research and whether you're publishing and those sorts of things. It's actually about, are you a great teacher who's investing in relationships with your students? Then you have to have some sort of training for those who are not doing such a great job at it. And it doesn't have to be substantial. Really, I think it can just be giving language. I was talking to my husband, who's a faculty member, and he was telling me about meeting with a student, and the student had done something really, was confronting a lot of really hard things. And I said, you know, you just have to make sure you say to him like, hey, I really admire you. You are doing really, really hard things. And I'm standing here really respecting the choices that you're making and the way that you're working at that. And Clint, my husband, was like, thank you so much for that language. I never would have said to him, hey, I really admire you and respect the choices you're making, because I just don't, that language doesn't, he's an accounting faculty, right? So he's like, that language doesn't come easily to me. But giving that language to him to be able to start the conversation off with, hey, you're safe here, I really admire you, you're doing a great job, then changes the trajectory of their relationship. And he's able to kind of learn that thing through some very small, here's a suggestion of this language. Okay, you guys, so I would like, here's your action items coming out of this. I would like for you to think about those 5 values and assess what's going on in your campus culture with those. So let's go over them one more time. How are you valuing students? How would we point to something and say, that is not just lip service, here are the places where we are articulating and making transparent our value for our students and their lives and what they're going to go on and do and their presence on our campus right now. Next, how are you valuing the effort of faculty and staff who are creating those relationships? Again, the principal responsibility is construction and maintaining a relationship-rich environment. How would I know that that's something that you value on your campus? Valuing high quality teaching. So how are we equipping our teachers to be able to do that really well? Valuing this web of human interaction where everybody believes they're doing something that's really powerful, that has a lot of meaning, and even down to our unsung heroes that are investing in our students. And then number 5, the value of engagement over prestige, not elite, but engaged. How would I know that that is a value on your campus? I think if you think about those 5 things, some of them you probably really excel at, and you're able to say, yes, here's the 5 things that we do that I think are really shoring up that particular value. But there may be some where you feel like, yeah, you know, I don't think that we value this. And I think that is worth a conversation as you're thinking about like your student care team or your student success team or your retention team, as you're thinking about rebuilding programs, rebranding programs you do, creating new programs, all of those different elements. Those 5 pieces have to come into play, and it has to be a campus systemic culture shift. Which is what's hard about culture, is that it's not just like, hey, we'll do this one thing and then it's solved. It's like we're reorienting ourselves towards a commitment to create a relationship-rich culture on our campuses so that students can find many different relationships to support them through and be more successful on your campus. So thank you for joining me. Next week, I will be on a campus, so we will not have Cap and Gown next week, but we will be back after that. I know you guys are doing great hard work. I know you're impacting your students in remarkable ways. I'm so grateful for your commitment to relationships on your campus, and I look forward to many continued conversations with you about that. So thanks for joining me. Have a great day.